All right. So usually there's like this jingle, the thing, and the thing, and the thing, and all the shows and everything. That is being reconstructed. So stay tuned for the newest intro video. But regardless, this is BasketBros. I'm Denzel Snipes, your moderator, and we've got an awesome show for you guys. We also have a guest. So I know we got to get more guests on the show. It's crazy. We've kind of had these walls up. It's time to start letting some other folks in. But again, I'm Denzel Snipes, and I know this is playoff weekend. All we ask is that you take an hour from your evening, spend it with us, and then we'll have you right on to the games. It's been a pretty crazy weekend so far, but we're here to give you the greatest in throwback basketball from 2000 on back. Sometimes we cheat a little bit and bring up the 2010s, but only to bridge another point, or sometimes we occasionally fly off topic. You know how Jacob does. Anyway, it's time to get the crew in here. DJ Willie V, all the way from Charlotte. How you doing, my man?
Good. NFL playoffs acting like crazy, but I'm ready to talk some basketball.
Yes, absolutely. And then also, he's the coming in, and he's the architect of the pundit's pundit. He's your granny's favorite pundit. He's your mother's favorite pundit. If you have a pet parrot, he's her favorite pundit. And she would even repeat pundit over and over and over until you got tired of it. Jacob Christner, come on in.
And here's the big thing about this. If you call the parrot a her, she's going to wonder if you assume the gender.
Yes. Polly want a pundit.
Yeah, Polly want a pundit. Yeah, well, Polly's not exactly a guy name.
No, it's not Paul. It's not Polly. It's Paul. They changed the name.
Paul the pundit. I like it. Paul the parrot. Yeah. It's like... And coming in, he is the captain, crew. Hell, he's the whole damn airline of the South Florida Tribune. He's coming off of a hell of a night covering the Jaguars last night, and he's got about maybe 40% energy left, but he's gracefully going to spend that energy on BasketBros. This is Scott, the Motor City Mad Mouth Morganroth. Come on in here, sir.
Thank you very much. And yes, Will, everybody's hungover about the NFL playoffs. Only I'm a lot more hungover than any of you guys.
Yep.
Because I've had a wild weekend up 5 hours north of I-95. Yeah, no, I don't mind this hour. It's kind of like a break because next week I shift into auto racing in Daytona the next 2 weeks. So I'd say 40% is what I have left. The bed awaits me after the show, but we got enough energy to get this one done. I've been looking forward to this one, and I'll enjoy working with you guys anyway. So we'll muster it up any way we can do it.
Awesome, great to have you as usual, part of the crew. And now for our guest. He too is a Detroit native, alongside Scott, alongside Don DeRubis. Come on in here, Mr. George Eichorn. I hope I said that name right.
Good to be part of the Basketball Bros, man. It's a pleasure being with all you guys. You're all great guys. I'm looking forward to tonight's show.
We now have 80 years of experience between the two at the bottom.
Pretty much.
Thank you, Jacob, you're well trained.
85. It should be 85, close to 90, but we'll give you that, Jacob.
Oh, okay.
Hey, and might I add, George, the background, like your house back there, the wooden walls, man, that's classic. It actually reminds me of my grandparents' old home. So, man, I love it. It's classic, man. I've always been a fan of the wooden walls, wooden floor type deal. You keep it nice and polished. It's great, man. It's that old style that like never gets old. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you, man. Just don't ask what's behind the blue curtain.
We don't talk about the blue curtain on BasketBros. We never bring up the blue curtain. We don't even say BC. So
yeah, we don't say BC.
Yes.
I mean, if you're going to talk about curtains, all you need to do is, since this BasketBros thing talks about old things, how about those dome stadiums that had curtains that divided one end to the other?
Yeah.
I'm at Silverdome. You ever heard of it? Of course, Stephen A. Smith still thinks the Detroit Lions playing it, but go figure.
I know, right?
Hey, George, did you polish your paneling lately?
Yeah, just in time for the show.
Yep.
Absolutely. But yeah, not to worry. Hey, number one rule about Blue Curtain Club is what? We don't talk about Blue Curtain Club.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, so to the audience out there, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, Chances are you're tuning in on one of our platforms that we're on, common ones rather, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. So if you're a brand new viewer, welcome. Wipe your feet on the mat. Come on in, have a drink. Just don't break anything, okay? Like that vase cost me $35. I don't want to have to, sue you or anything like that. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You're rich,
hit
Denzel.
that something like that. I wish I had the other Denzel's money. Anyway, if like I said, first time viewer, great. Hit that like, but more importantly, hit that subscribe button to Sideline Sports because we's not just BasketBros, not just a bunch of guys talking around old basketball. We got the gauntlet. We got the Sideline Sports Show. We got Sports Arena. We got Ball Don't Lie. We got Three Chicks in the Pod. We got the Cold Hard Truth. We got the Pundits Pundit. I mean, we got a plethora of shows, so much so that if you're like all you do is watch sports, you won't even have to pay for like an actual cable subscription. Just tune in to Sideline Sports because that's what we do. Jake Malik loves to say that we're the people's ESPN, and that's more than accurate. That's actually an understatement. We are for the people. We're for the children. Well, maybe not Jacob, but you get what I'm saying. So
See.
with that being said, let's transition on to our first topic, and that is our BasketBros Legend of the Week, Dave Bing. Now he is an actual a unique legend of the week because not only was he known basketball wise, he actually was the 74th mayor of Detroit from 2009 to 2013. Let's see. As far as his playing career, he was drafted out of Syracuse. He was the second overall pick in the 66 draft. He was selected by the Detroit Pistons, where he played from 66 to 75. From 75 to 77, he went to Washington, and then he ended his career with the Celtics. He was a 7-time NBA All-Star. NBA All-Star Game was valuable player, 2-time All-NBA first team, All-NBA second team. He also was NBA Rookie of the Year, All-NBA All-Rookie team. He got a scoring title in 1968. He's on the anniversary team, 50th and the 75th. His jersey number 21 is retired by the Pistons. In college, he was a consensus first-team All-American, a 3-time All-American NABC, and number 22 retired by the Syracuse Orange. He averaged 20.3 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, and 6.0 assists per game. He's in both Hall of Fames as college and as a player. And I know that some of you are seething to, get to your thoughts about Dave being overall a great individual. One of the staple. I mean, he long before the Bad Boy Pistons, he was a staple name out there. I want to swing it on over to Will. Your thoughts about Dave Bing?
Yeah, it's one of those names that's not talked about a lot in NBA history, unfortunately. And Dave Bing, what I read about him, and this is crazy, in his second year in the NBA, he won the scoring title over Wilt Chamberlain and I think Bill Russell.
Yep.
Or Wilt Chamberlain and someone else. But that's just impressive because at that point, not saying Dave Bing was a small guy. Wilt Chamberlain was huge. It was a big man's league. You got Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, other big men. And the other thing is, Dave Bing also, I read 2 cool things about him. When he went to Syracuse, do you know who he was roommates with, Jay?
At Syracuse? Who?
The only current head coach of Syracuse, Jim Boeheim.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Huh. Interesting.
And
That's pretty
also,
cool.
fun fact,
That's interesting.
in his youth, when he played basketball, he played against singer, songwriter, and musician Marvin Gaye.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah,
That's
nice.
awesome. And he also, besides mayor, I think he owned his own company, I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
And
he did.
he not only was a good player, but he was a good businessman. So it's one of those cool things where it's not one of the scenarios where an athlete was a good player and then he failed at business. It's one of those stories that you like to hear where he was a good player and then a good businessman. So that's who Dave Bing was and is currently.
And it's not too many people who can leave their primary profession and then go and make a successful transition into politics. You know, you think whether you're fans of these guys or not, you think of like Jesse the Body Ventura. He retired from wrestling. He went to be the governor of Minnesota. You think of
You know
Arnold
who else I think
Schwarzenegger.
of?
You know,
You know
who was
who
it?
else I think of? Kevin Johnson,
Yes,
mayor of Sacramento.
Mayor of
Well, you know
Sacramento.
what?
Yep. Then there's also
You know what?
it was a Jack Kemp who
Yeah, you know what, Denzel, thank you very much. That's what I was thinking. I actually met Jack Kemp over at Super Bowl 39 in Jacksonville, and when I was covering the Super Bowl there, and it was a great thrill for me as I was talking about youth football with Jack Kemp. Congressman Kemp was actually drafted by the Detroit Lions and the Buffalo Bills of the other league and opted to go with Buffalo. And Will, I want to point out something too, which I'm really impressed with. Okay, and I'm glad that you were able to mention the fact that he played in an era with such big people, which nowadays is unheard of. You know, that to me shows me you really did your research awfully well. You really did.
yes.
And the Boeheim thing is really good. More power to you, Will.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and Jack Kemp also was a genuinely good dude. There was a teammate of his that was going through some kind of condition. He needed surgery, and he like paid for like all his medical bills, the surgery, everything. So Jack Kemp was a good dude. Also, want to swing it over to Jacob. Your thoughts on Dave Bing?
Well, I've got a story not on Dave Bing himself, but a certain cousin. I was going for an insurance license one year, like 2009 or something, one of those years and everything. The teacher was Al Bing, one of his cousins.
Oh, sweet.
So it was Al Bing. And Al Bing was kind of like The Rock as far as going third person. He'd be like 20 minutes into his classroom and he'd be going. Anyway, I remember when I was when I was helping a person with his roof, and he goes, "Al Bing, I've got a hole in my roof. What does Al Bing says?"
You know, that's hilarious.
He'd do all. He would just. That's the way he'd go the whole time. He got so bored with his own. He got so bored with his own classroom. He wanted to entertain everybody. So I saw him about a year ago last time. Al Bing, and he needed a new hip, but otherwise he was doing pretty good. But the thing about Dave Bing is what I call consistency. Consistency. Not only did he have 27 points a game twice, but also even toward the end of his career. You know how we have all these other people with like 2 points a game, 4 points a game when they're at their end. He was still around 13 points a game, and his knees were gone. Yeah. And his knees were basically gone, and he had 11 years in the league, and he still did. He had 8 of his 11 years of 20 points a game. Right. He just kept himself. I'm surprised he went to Boston for the final part of his career. That was probably just a career thing. Probably just like they wanted to cut him, and he got a different team, play one more year. Plus, it's Boston. You don't know if they have a big time or not. You know what I mean? You don't know if they're gonna have a big. He has one chance at a ring. That's the big deal because you go for. It was the same thing as Pete Maravich went to Boston. He went for one more shot. You know. So I think that's what they did. But I would say the thing with Dave Bing is I would call him. We talk about him being Kevin Johnson because of Mayer. You want to know what I would call him of his day? Steph Curry. And the reason I'll say Steph Curry is because you could call him basically a shooting guard. He really didn't do a whole lot of rebound, not a whole lot of running the court, not a whole lot of running the court, not a whole lot of quarterbacking. He was a shooter and he was a scorer, and it was everything like that. But you didn't see a whole lot. I mean, what was it? I'm seeing right now at this point in time about 6 assists a game for his career, which in comparison to others was kind of low, but it's consistent. But he was a scorer, and I look at it this way: it's like just a really good player and a obviously top notch in the community and popular because he got Mayor. So those are the things overall that I look at with Dave Bing, and at least I could say I met his cousin. I met his cousin.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that actually was a great description. I would go as far. I wouldn't necessarily say Curry. I mean, it's not too far off. I would say he was more the Kyrie of his day. But yeah, I want to swing it over to our. Yeah. I mean, you could go either way. I want to swing it over to our guest, George. Your thoughts on Dave Bing, man?
Well, being from the Motor City, obviously he's one of the pillars here in the Pistons franchise history. No question about it. Dave Bing is a remarkable individual. I always remember that draft. You know, the New York Knicks had the first pick in that draft, and Bing was picked by the Pistons second. The Knicks picked Cassie Russell of the University of Michigan. So there was no pressure on the Pistons that picking the number 2 and having to pick Cassie. Cassie had a nice career, but not nearly the career that Dave Bing had. So that Piston draft, Dave Bing fell into their laps. The Pistons were under the ownership of a guy named Fred Zollner from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And they were looking for a superstar. Well, they already had a star or two. Don't get me wrong. Dave DeBusschere played for the Pistons, as you guys know, before the New York Knicks. And Dave Bing, he is just a consummate pro. All that you guys have said about him is so true. I'll never forget the fact that he never left Detroit in his heart. Okay, he might have been playing for Washington and that, but he never left his heart. His heart was always Detroit, and that's why he came back and started the Bing Steel Corporation, very successful steel company here. And of course, as you guys alluded to, during some tough years, he was mayor of Detroit when they obviously went bankrupt, and he ceded most of his power to a fellow named Kevin Orr to manage the bankruptcy here in Detroit. But Dave, I'll never forget, he would come to the games even after he was retired. He looked like $1 million. You ought to see the suits that he wore. He and his wife, or he and his daughter, would come and show up at the Piston games. And I know, Scott, you remember this at the Silverdome. And Dave would come fashionably dressed. He had season tickets. He kept those season tickets all those years following the Pistons. Just a great man, a great person, great individual. I had the privilege of knowing him and meeting him several times and interviewing him as well.
Awesome.
I'll go
go ahead, Will.
before Scott goes. When you said flashy suits, this comes to my mind. Whenever I go to Hornets games, I see the Knicks, and I'm like, okay, they brought their own broadcast crew. Walt Frazier always has the nicest suits ever.
Yes, he does. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. That was great. You got to know him and interview him and everything. It's such an experience. And then Scott, on to you. I know you've been waiting to talk on Dave Bing. We actually pushed this player 1 week to today, so you could come on and talk about him. But
smart enough to know that my racing schedule the next 2 weeks is going to be chaotic. So I'm glad you did that. Well, number one, I've got you beat there, Jacob. I went to school with his daughter Cassandra Bing in the Southfield School District.
Well, well, one big thing is at least she was the better looking one.
Well, I don't know. All I can say is we got along okay. I didn't know her that well, but she was in the Southfield School District.
Right.
And when you're in a community like Southfield, I also went to school with Murray Howe, the son of legendary hockey player Gordie Howe as well. Mm-hmm. At that time, Southfield was considered a place where a lot of kids ended up going to school. I think what's good about Dave Bing, though, is when you think about the guy, he played at the old Cobo Arena in his prime, before the Silverdome and before the Palace and now Little Caesars. So, I think George was about 10, 12,000 seat arena. That's about it.
Yes.
But more importantly, you want to talk about an incredible 1-2 punch. What about Dave Bing and Bob Lanier and those teams in the early 70s? I remember in Pistons Chicago Bulls series going 7 games, and they had some pretty good teams back then in the 70s before things ended up obviously getting away from them. So Dave Bing, you mentioned it, Denzel, and I'll reiterate on that, okay? And that's this, okay? Jack Kemp was unbelievable, but Dave Bing, to me, when you're able to be part of a city which is going through some major difficulties, such as a bankruptcy, it was a job that was a thankless job, but he rose up to the challenge to get it worked out, and more power to him.
What is that noise in the background?
I don't know. It's not coming from my end. It takes a hell of an individual to take on the responsibility of being in charge over a city that's going through like that type of decline and whatnot. He could have went and tried his hand like anywhere else, but he picked Detroit.
One thing you got to understand though too, that in Detroit, the Pistons are the fourth wheel is what they really are. You think about the Lions have always owned the town. The Red Wings are there, and the Tigers. So the Pistons are right. George are like kind of like a distant fourth.
Absolutely,
Even though
Scott.
they gained ground when they were winning championships, is what they were doing. The Pistons have never had the real love compared to the other ones. But Dave Bing was just unbelievable. And that's why I suggest that we bring him on here, because when you look at Legends of the Week, I want Dave Bing to get his due nationally. And I'm glad that we're taking tonight to give him that respect.
Let me ask a
Yes,
question
absolutely.
real fast. Let me ask a question real fast to you. It's like I was saying, the one thing I noticed is quite a few players of that era that were heading out. I mean, I brought up Maravich, I brought up Bing. A lot of them went to Boston at the end. That was their it. And it's like at some point, maybe it was just ending it. Some reason, as other reasons, was trying to get a title. And he had those, even though Boston was pretty bad in a couple of those years. Now, let me ask this. Why did Dave Bing leave Detroit? What happened?
I don't remember exactly what precipitated the trade. Scott, you probably don't either.
Yeah, I
but-
do. So let me answer that question for you, Jacob. He was traded to the Washington Bullets at the time for Kevin Porter. They were looking for a guy that could be more of an assist guy, is what they were doing. So it was like you were trading scoring for an assist guy. What it kind of reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me of when what was it? The trade for the Tigers, where you had the Harvey Keene was traded for, who was it, George? Rocky Colavito. Yeah, so you had like the guy that could hit singles for average for a guy that hit home runs. But to answer your question, Jacob, okay, he was traded to Washington for Kevin Porter, score for an assist guy, ball distribution guy. That's
Okay.
And Kevin Porter didn't come without some problems, so they had many issues later on with him and his behavior.
And injuries didn't help him either.
Right.
Because right around the time he was about tail end of Washington, maybe the first year in Boston is when his knees started going, huh?
Yeah, 1977-78, he was with Boston, and that's a good point that you brought up, Jeremy. It's very similar to the Detroit Red Wings when they were, and I know it's a different sport, but
Jeremy or Jacob?
Jacob, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
very similar to the Red Wings, how the Red Wings got these guys at the end of their careers. All of them wanted to come and get that Stanley Cup with Detroit. I think you're onto something. Going to the Boston Celtics, elite franchise, one of the best in history. I'm sure it enticed a lot of people, including Dave Bing, to do so.
Well, he followed in the footsteps of Chris Ford, who ended up going to Boston as well.
Chris Ford, ML Carr, a lot of former Pistons ended up in Boston, some by trade and some by other means.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's not out of the realm of thought. That'd be like today if someone went to the Warriors or something like that, know. And I know at the time period he went to Boston, he was past his prime. But it's just like when we talked about Peyton Manning when he went to the Broncos. You've done so much to your career. And of course, like if he would have won in Boston, right? Oh, he got carried to that ring. He deserved to be carried. He'd done so much, to get to that point. He can join and be a mid. I'm not expecting him to. He averaged 20 a game, but but Jacob brought it up, right? Toward the end of his career, he was still averaging 13. He goes there. He's not going to be the main guy, and that's okay. He can still put up a respectable 13 points a game and be that veteran leadership. It's crazy though. Before we move on, it's crazy how like him and Maravich went to Boston, and they they either just caught him or they barely missed Larry Bird.
Yeah. I can tell you this. I looked at those. You look at those All-Star games. You look at all that kind of stuff, and for instance, I remember the '82 All-Star game. Not really, but from the highlights, I can because my memories go to '84. But I can just see. You can just see Larry Bird. He gave about 6 assists to George Gervin. You have to wonder how George Gervin would wish and pray to have. How many more points would he have had with Bird giving him the rock every night?
Yeah. I mean, really think for a second. Really think for a second if Maravich's knees hadn't went and if Bing's knees hadn't went and they played with Larry. I think Bing leaves with a ring.
Yeah.
And so does Maravich.
Well, Bing is Dennis Johnson of that era. He's the Dennis Johnson of that era. It's like Dennis Johnson wasn't a monstrous feeder, but he fed Bird. But guess what? He was a scorer himself, so he would have been the Dennis Johnson of that era.
Yeah, but even then, Dennis Johnson was what, the 4th scoring option?
Yeah, there were so many scoring options. Yeah, there was more options than Morgan Stanley. I'm telling you.
Yes, and then Dennis Johnson. You know, so
Well, it's amazing how we have a Johnson thing. We have a Kevin Johnson who's a politician. Now we got Dennis Johnson. My goodness.
yeah,
If
absolutely.
you're looking to
But
hashtag the show, just go ahead and hashtag it Johnson. That might help you.
you know what? This speaking of Johnson is a perfect segue into our next topic in time. The 1986 Western Conference Finals. Ralph Sampson's game-winning shot stuns the Lakers and sends Rockets to NBA Finals, denying James Worthy, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson of a fifth straight Finals appearance. Awesome highlight, awesome shot that doesn't get talked about. You know, there's been some times when the Houston Rockets in the past have been a thorn in the Lakers' side because it was them that beat the Lakers in 81 in the Western Conference Finals to go to the NBA Finals, in which that team, that Rockets team stands as the last team to make the NBA Finals with a losing record. However, want to swing it over to Will, man. Your thoughts about this and the impact that it must have had that the Rockets knocked out the Los Angeles Lakers.
Oh man, talk about dynasty with the Lakers. The only other team in the 80s that made the finals were the Rockets, which was twice. Every other year was the Lakers. So beating a powerhouse juggernaut like that, man, it just makes you happy and just propels just like greatness. Also, the Lakers were the defending champs. They had 11 more wins that year than the Rockets. And also, this was the Rockets weren't even really a slouch of a team, even though the Lakers were the dynasty
Lakers,
with Magic, Kareem, Worthy. The Rockets had Hakeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson, who were the Twin Towers, and that was a dynamic front court at that time, and one of the best front courts in NBA history. And yeah, it's crazy.
So, Will, let me ask you a trivia question. I'm really curious. Okay, you ready? You talked about the Rockets going to the finals with a sub 500 record. Do you know who the coach of that team was?
Rudy Tomjanovich?
No, it wasn't Rudy.
No,
not for the one that was. But you know what though? I'll tell you the answer, and this will blow your mind because I'm sure a lot of people don't. Maybe George Del Harris.
I know.
Oh, I forgot.
I know, but I wasn't going to interrupt it. I know.
No, that's okay. Well, you know what, Jacob? That's why I went out there and mentioned it to Will. I mean, he's all over the map now. If I don't mind me interjecting, Ralph Sampson and Hakeem Olajuwon, I think when they ended up landing those two, didn't they at some point begin to get the lottery where teams can get back-to-back 1-to-1 picks? I think that began the formulation of the lottery at some point.
Update, by the way, folks. Darius Miles charged with murder.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my.
Yeah, Darius Miles charged with murder. I just saw it right now.
Okay.
Crazy. But I want to swing over to Jacob. Your thoughts about this moment in time and what impact it must have been that, you know, the Rockets knocked out the Lakers is through a Texas-sized monkey wrench in that engine.
Bittersweet, because I was absorbing like I said, by 84, I was absorbing it fully. So you're going 2 years later. It was bittersweet for me because you love seeing the Lakers go, but I knew the Celtics were going to whip them. The Celtics were just so good that year. So, but the biggest thing about it is when you talk about the however many finals in a row, 4 finals in a row and everything, you would hear this. Houston knocked out the Lakers themselves in 81 also. You think this. Every single time they got themselves, it looks like they're going to get themselves to a final or they're going to get anywhere. Something knocks them out. I get that. It's like it shows how tough it is to win titles. I mean, look how good and how powerful those Lakers teams were. And all they did was just continue to reload. And yet it's, you know, they always had something. Like the Houston knocked them out twice. Philadelphia took them in the finals in 83. You look at this and then you just realize when you hear those 2 three-peats by the Bulls and just like how hard is it to keep that consistency? How hard it is to keep that discipline? How hard is it to do that when even the Lakers, who were powerhouses, just kept adding to the team could lose. You know, they could lose. It's like in the end, got to remember 80 they win it. 81 they get knocked out. 82 win. 83 knocked out by Philly. 84 knocked out by Boston. 85 win it. 86 knocked out by Houston. And then 87 win, 88 win, and it's like, but yet they couldn't get the three-peat. So you look at, I'm just saying, so you have a powerhouse team, and even they could have a vulnerability. And by the way, 4 of those times they got knocked out in their own home place in the Forum.
Yes, this moment happened at the Forum. You know, the Twin Towers, man, and you know, like you look at the second iteration of the Twin Towers with David Robinson and Tim Duncan. And there's a reason for that. You know, when you have a tag team, it's like, back then, because Ralph Sampson was what, 7'2"? Hakeem 6'10". 7'4". I'm sorry, 7'4". Hakeem 6'10". That's a lot of size out there. And then not to mention Hakeem being as athletic as he was. He was a literal unstoppable force. The man's never been dominated in his career, even back then.
Well, one thing about Sampson. Sorry. You there?
No, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. No, one thing about Sampson, terrible with injuries. With injuries. He also did, and even if he didn't win terrible with injuries, he was the LeBron of his day. If he got knocked over, he would squirm around. He just did not have a pain tolerance whatsoever. He was not a tough guy. He was the Flash. He was one of the first 7'4" guys that could go down the court. He was very athletic. But I was never that impressed with Ralph Sampson. I just never was. It's like just between the stuff that I've known. I mean, Virginia getting knocked out by Chaminade. He lost so many big games. He lost many and had bad games in those big games. He was very athletic, but he just wasn't. He was just more overrated than anything else. Then he had the very short, by itself, he had a kind of a short NBA career because injuries took him. And then he just didn't have a pain tolerance. He just was. I mean, and then he just didn't. He didn't pan out the way everybody thought he would.
Right. He was. He was Yao Ming before Yao Ming. Awesome size. When healthy, he was a force, but he was brittle. You know.
Yeah.
But let's swing it over to our guest George. I'm pretty sure you remember this moment. Your thoughts on this moment right here, and what were you thinking like when that shot happened? It's like, oh wow, like that really happened.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that. It's just such a stunner, you know. And like you said, you know, they were playing at home at the Forum, and Sampson was one of those dynamic personalities of that era, a dominant player, but also could be beaten at times. But I'll tell you what, Houston Rockets, they were amazing. That team really had some great talent and great coaches. Del Harris, like you mentioned earlier, Scott, and then of course Rudy T over all those years. But Ralph Sampson shot unbelievable, Denzel. I remember watching it on television that night and couldn't believe it, really. It was so stunning because everybody was picking the Lakers to win. It's just a stunner. One of those times in history where you just can't forget. So I'm glad you brought that up tonight. That's a great one.
Awesome. Absolutely. You know, want to swing it over to Scott also. Like, what were your thoughts when I don't know if you watched it live on TV or just heard about it, but what were your thoughts when this happened? Like, wow, like the Lakers are like they're gone.
Well,
they were here and they're gone, and the Rockets just knocked them out.
Let me fill in a couple blanks here. Number one, okay, I'll never forget that when we talk about Moses Malone, he was, I believe, on that sub 500 team with Houston, and then he went over to Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia hammered the Lakers. So they're just collecting the dots. In terms of the fact that Ralph Sampson was very brittle, oh yeah, I mean, you know, what can I tell you? I think at times today's version is Giancarlo Stanton is being brittle too, or Aaron Judge up until he had this explosive year. But let's face the reality, the Lakers and Houston Rockets, before the Spurs came into play, Houston was one of the better franchises out there. So was I surprised? No, not really. I mean, I remember years ago we wanted to see Patrick Ewing and Ralph Sampson play in college, and we got that game, Virginia against Georgetown. And I believe, if I remember right, Virginia got the best of that, but we all know that Patrick Ewing had a much better pro career than Ralph Sampson did. So I wasn't really surprised. I mean, when you have a guy 7'4", I mean, let's face the reality. Some of your tall centers at that time had the sky hook, and they were so much taller that they can make a high percentage shot with their wingspan and their height anyhow. So was I stunned? No, not really. Anytime you have a guy with a prohibitive size advantage, I don't know how much stunned you can be. But again, we cannot emphasize the reality between Houston and the Lakers. That was a good rivalry back then. It really was, until other teams came into play. So I hope that answers it. And the Rockets have made a good representation of themselves in the finals, winning a couple titles, and they've battled hard when they've gotten there.
Well, also, here's the thing I look at too. This is the thing I'm not going to say with Houston or any of this kind of stuff because we already brought that up. Here's the thing I say with the Lakers. In one case, they have all those titles. You cannot ever take that away. But I can say one big thing with them. The television, and you know this from you, both of you being journalists, television brings a certain storyline at all times. You both know this. Here's the big thing about it. They brought the Forum like this is an impossible place to go be. Philadelphia took them out 4 straight games, including 2 in the Forum. Houston takes them out. Detroit sweeps them, takes them 2 in there. The Celtics were outside of the Philadelphia and 1 Lakers were pretty impossible until Detroit took them out in the Boston Garden. They were, 8 straight game 7s. But Bird won 8 straight game 7s. He was 11-3 in deciders, and the other 2 were because his back was gone.
Well, let me tell you. Yeah. I'm sorry, Jacob. I've seen a couple of games at the old Boston Garden, and some of the things you get out of there with the ball hitting the ground in a weird way, and Vinnie Johnson and who was it? Joe Dumars collided.
No. It was Adrian Dantley. It was Dantley.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for correcting me. It was Adrian. I'm sorry. Thanks for correcting. Adrian Dantley and Vinnie Johnson. This Boston Garden was a house of horrors for a lot of people. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but when
you're good. No, it was an absolute house of horrors. It's like you can just take a look close when you see this high definition cameras on the ground now. Like when you see them in like images on the Google or something. Look at all those bolts. Look at all those look at those dead holes right into the area, those gaps that you could just dribble. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole the Boston Garden in general. Plus, it had it predated air conditioning. So they made that one game. They made that one game where it was 110 degrees or whatever in there, but Kareem has the oxygen. That was every final. That was every final during that year. I mean, they just got hotter than usual, but they had every single time because they had no air conditioning.
Well, let me tell you, I've had the opportunity to watch games in both the Forum in Inglewood a couple times, as well as the Boston Garden. So you want to talk about intimidating places with fan bases and the atmosphere. Those are 2 of the best out there. But the Boston Garden, I think, was worse in terms of the ability to, cause teams nightmares. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would think, and you mentioned it, Jacob, that the media likes to paint the storyline that the Forum was just this impossible place to win and whatnot. And then you brought up the subsequent, big victories there. And let's not forget, the media has always loved Los Angeles since the beginning of time. Of course, they're going to say that. And I think we all are in agreement that Boston Garden is a worse place to play because what was one of our topics last week on BasketBros? 40-1 at home.
Yeah. Holly, here's the difference.
The Lakers have never gone 40-1.
Yeah. No.
At home.
Here's the thing about the Forum. You're right. Here's the thing about the Forum. This is the truth with this. It was tough, okay? But if you compare it to Boston Garden, you've got working class steel workers, right? And you have blood, sweat, tears, Boston, Southeast, Boston. You've got those guys; they're just ready to kill. Versus Hollywood.
Like, you got a guy that's got a reputation for being not a conniver, but a manipulator, in Red Auerbach too. Don't forget.
Well, he's a New Yorker.
Brett Auerbach there too.
Yeah, a New Yorker who basically made his home in Boston. Very, you're right, a conniver.
Yeah. Well, and look at the styles of the teams. Like the fast break, Showtime Lakers, LA. It's phenomenal net. Then you look at Boston, blue collar, in your face, you know, and their atmospheres, you know. You would think that it'd be New York and Boston. No, I'm sorry, New York and LA. No, it was Boston and LA. Like that. That's the rivalry, and it's crazy how they contrasted so much. But it made for like classic. It made for classic TV.
They both.
But
Before you go on, I wanted to say this. George and Scott will agree with me on this. They both had fast breaks. The difference was the LA had a fast break because they were fast. The Boston had a fast break because the ball was faster. Everybody got down the court and then the ball was faster. It was one of Bird's long throws.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Bird, you know, for being a point forward, he had a quarterback's arm. But want to move over to our next topic. We got about probably 15 minutes left. But this is our second BasketBros moment in time. I hope I clicked it, and that is, and I'm waiting to hear from the two down here about this one. The 1988 NBA Finals. Game 6. Isaiah Thomas scores 25 points in the first quarter on a bad angle. At the time period, it stood a record for the most points in a quarter, and even though 3 points and 8 assists. Now, this is the smallest man on the team. That is your leading scorer. He dropped 25 in the first quarter on once again, the Lakers. You know, and it's just something gutsy about this performance. But, you know, having watched Isaiah growing up, he'd always been that gutsy individual. He'd always been that blue collar in your face. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to bring it type person. And you get a game like this, even in a losing effort. I mean, 43-8, like that's absolutely nothing to seize at, especially by 1988 standpoints. But I want to swing it over to Will. Your thoughts on this and the type of performance that this is, and also what it would spell for the future of NBA players.
Well, it was against a very great Lakers team, and this type of performance is up there with other great performances in NBA history. One I think of whenever I hear this is when Willis Reed limped out. When Willis Reed limped out for the Knicks to play in the NBA Finals, he was obviously hurt. Isaiah Thomas was. And it's sad because this is one of the least talked about NBA Finals moments because you have, of course, the Jordan flu game. Yeah, just hit us up.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep going, Will.
Sorry.
Definitely.
It's up there with the Jordan flu game and the Willis Reed injury and others. And this one's not talked about as much, which is sad because Isaiah was a great player for those really good Pistons teams. And it's like playing through adversity and giving it your all. And players nowadays, this sounds like something Jacob would say, but they would have a hangnail and be like, "Oh, I can't play. No, literally.
Or Scott. Scott would say that.
Or Scott. But no, like this is playing through adversity. Guys, nowadays, it could be the smallest thing and they're like, "Oh, I'm not playing." Like back then, you gave it your all. You gave it all on the line for your team to win. And that's what Isaiah did. Sure, he didn't win the finals, but he gave a hell of a performance. And it is one of the best moments in finals history.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it set a record at the time period. It was just gutsy. That's the first word that comes to mind is gutsy. It's just a gutsy performance by him. But I want to swing it over to Jacob, and I'm waiting to hear from you about this. But what type of tone did this performance set for the future of NBA players and performances?
Really, there was others before, but the biggest thing about it is we talked about Boston and LA, okay? The Flash versus blue collar. Here's the truth. These two know it. Detroit was blue collar tough too, but it was not going to fit in the media storyline because it was black team versus black team.
Right.
It was the black team, and I'm just saying, black team versus black team. Boston and LA was white team versus black team, with all the thing. But this is the deal. Detroit is as blue collar as Boston. Detroit's as tough. They
Yes.
were. Why do you think those Detroit Boston games were wars? Because Boston didn't back down. Detroit didn't back down. They grinded it. They won 7 games twice. And it's like they just pounded each other. And it's like they're both blue collar. The difference, like I said, the difference in the media time was simply I'm just being truthful with this. It was even back in the 80s, it was that media storyline you're looking. They said blue collar, the buzzword blue collar versus flash. But you could do that with Detroit too, but it was white player versus black player. And it is what they've done. And they would still do that to this day. But that kept Detroit from getting the same respect by itself. But let's just say this about Isaiah right now. That is one gutsy player forever. Just looking at even at the end when you've got to remember, he was trying to play all the way until his Achilles popped. He kept trying to play, then it popped and it was over. He and Larry Bird were one of the two that did a rare thing. They played every inch of themselves until it was all over. They gave every inch of their being to that, both Bird and Isaiah, until it was over. And it was like, and you will not see that again. Yeah,
that's unfortunate. Like this is a time period where, they really just grinded it out. And the crazy part is had he had sat, no one would have been, terrible about it because, well, he's got a bad ankle. But the man goes out there and drops 43 points. But saving the best for last on this one, and that's our two at the bottom from Detroit themselves. Want to start off with our guest, George. Your thoughts about this performance, because I'm sure you saw this and was like, wow, a one-legged man really just dropped 43 on the almighty Lakers.
A one-legged man
of course, I was credentialed for the finals, but my paper is just a little bit on the small side that I wrote for at the time, so we couldn't go to any road games, but I did see the home games in this series. And, Lunch Bucket, Steel City, Detroit, Rust Belt, a working man city, and Isaiah just would not take no for an answer. We had a great training staff, and Scott, you remember this, Dr. Ben Palucci and trainer Mike Abdenauer. Right. And both those guys did their best to, bandage up Isaiah, I'm sure, to go out there and give it a try. And, of course, Chuck Daly, what a great coach, the late Chuck Daly of the Detroit Pistons. This was the first finals, I believe, that Boston wasn't in it since back in 1983. So the fans were seeing a new, different type of team here. Detroit, strong, aggressive. Bill Lambier and Rip Mahorn and all these guys that played for the Pistons, all tough guys. And even Isaiah, small Isaiah, a guard, he could not say no. He wanted to go out there, and he was determined. And what a performance, you're right. It was just an incredible performance, even though the Pistons lost that series. But Isaiah certainly gave 110% and then some, where most guys would just sit out, say, I can't play.
Yeah, and not to mention, it was this series and quite possibly that performance that was the predecessor because the Pistons would win the next two. So swinging over to Scott, last but not least, and I almost solely had you in mind when I picked this topic, but your thoughts on this performance, because I know you're wanting to get your thoughts in on this one.
Well, first of all, a healthy Isaiah Thomas for the whole series of the Pistons three-peat, number one. Mm-hmm. They three-peat because they proceeded to win the next two. Number two, okay, I never forget, George, you might have been at the game at Joe Louis Arena when Bernard King had a lot of points and Isaiah matched them bucket for bucket. Yeah. The thing I liked about Isaiah Thomas is he wasn't afraid to get into a fight with Karl Malone of the Utah Jazz. Now, here's something that will blow you guys away. When George and I were covering home games in that series, George would get the Pistons locker room and I would get the Lakers locker room. And I had a chance to go ahead and interview Dick Hearn, the late announcer, and it was unbelievable. I don't know where that tape is. Then you never know where any of these tapes are after several years. But the reality to me is that Isaiah Thomas somewhat reminds me of Allen Iverson in a sense that I've never seen a smaller guy have so much guts that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I enjoyed working with Isaiah as well. So a healthy Isaiah Thomas in that series, and Detroit would have won 3 titles. Period.
I agree.
Truth,
Yeah.
4. They should have had 4. And I'm just
Well,
being
at least
truthful.
3.
I'm just saying Bird bailed out 87. They were so hurt. They were so everything. And he bailed out 87. He bailed them out against Milwaukee. He bailed them out against Detroit. He bailed out 87. As I said, truthfully, should have been 4.
Well, either way, more than 2, no matter how you want to slice it. I mean, but the reality is when I've worked with a guy like Isaiah, and he would end up coaching Florida International University for a couple of years, so I got to spend time with him down here in Miami in South Florida. But, he's just an unbelievable player. And the irony is when you talk about Isaiah and Bird is that when Bird became an executive for the Indiana Pacers, he got rid of Isaiah because the rivalry was so intense. Neither wanted anything to do with each other. So in the NBA, okay, you have grudges. Now, I will say what I like about our show is we call it BasketBros. If you had to come up with a spinoff on today's game, we would call it basketball schmoes. Okay, because that's
I was gonna say basket boys.
Yeah, that too. But I like schmoes better. Well, only because it rhymes with bros, schmoes and bros. But either way, well, there might be a royalty for us somewhere down the road. I don't know if I'll live to see it, but if you ever want airtime, we can have basketball schmoes or basket schmoes.
No, I like Basket Bros better.
Oh, me too. I'm just kidding with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isaiah Thomas to me was a combination of a scorer and this guy knew when to take over games when he had to. And remember, the first coach that he went with George, I believe, was Scotty Robertson until they brought in Chuck Daly. So
Jack McCloskey brought in Chuck Daly, and guys, I don't know if you remember this, but William Davidson, the owner, Bill Davidson, that was his boy. Pardon the expression. Isaiah Thomas was his favorite Piston, and he could do no wrong in Detroit as long as Bill Davidson still owned that team. And there was one of the greatest loyalties I ever saw between an owner and a star player was between Davidson and Isaiah. Remember that, Scott?
Yeah, but the only thing that ended badly about that was I know that Isaiah was ready to make an announcement that he was going to be with the Pistons, and the whole thing came apart. Otherwise, aside from that, and then Isaiah went on to Toronto to try to build a rap.
Well, here's the thing, too. You talk about Jack McCloskey. He made Showtime. You talk about a coach that bad luck kept him from everything Pat Riley got.
Right.
Everything Matt Riley's a great coach. Jack McCloskey built Showtime. But what happens after? He gets a couple of years in Indiana, 25 average wins, becomes an assistant coach. This is the thing. You talk about somebody, a bike accident changes the course of history.
You say
you're going to have everything Pat Riley.
You say that Jack McCloskey built Showtime. Aren't you thinking of Jerry Watt?
No, I'm talking about Showtime. The Showtime offense is Jack McCloskey's.
Oh, okay. All right. I just trying to get clarity on that.
That was Jack McCloskey.
It was adapted by the Lakers, and
then he had the bike wreck. Then it becomes Westhead. Then Riley, and I think Magic liked McCloskey better anyway than Westhead. So then we might have had a thing where McCloskey gets all those accolades later instead of Riley. So you never know.
Yeah, very good point. But hey, Detroit was fortunate to get him with that great amount of work that he did as general manager. He managed that team so very well, Jack. In fact, he had his number retired. Yeah, right. General managers have numbers, but yeah, he had his name retired to the rafters of both the Palace and Little Caesars Arena, that being Jack McCloskey.
Well, good for them, yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Great guy. Unfortunate situation, though, in LA. You're right.
But hey, we have a few minutes left. So real quick, I just wanted to get on to our final topic. So in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Day, we have the topic of favorite NBA moments on games on Martin Luther King Day. And the NBA has managed to play games on Martin Luther King Day since the holiday was first recognized in 1986. I'll go first real quick. January of 1996. Michael Jordan had the highest scoring game in Martin Luther King Day history when he scored 46 points. And on that day, they beat Washington 116-109. And that mark stood for 10 years until Gilbert Arenas scored 51 points. So that was the moment that I had. Will, on to you, man.
Well, there was a Hornets one, but I didn't pick it because that's just typical of me. I picked Shaquille O'Neal. He had 38 points, 16 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. And the most impressive thing was 8 blocks in a game, which was tied or is still tied for Patrick Ewing for the most blocks in an NBA game on MLK.
Nice. Awesome. And Jake, on to you.
2 of them. Dame Lillard, 61 in 2020.
Yep,
Yep.
that
Dame
was a
Lillard,
really
61
good
in
one.
2020, and then you had Arenas with 51. You had Arenas with 51, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to those. It's like those are 2 of the absolute favorite. And then there's other points. And then you had KD outdueling LeBron. You had those. You have those type of games. There's been a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. George, on to you.
Yeah, I picked the Arenas one as well. That was the one that stood out for me. That was a great win and a great effort. The Pistons have had a few games on Martin Luther King Day. I recall both at the Palace and at Little Caesars Arena. And I think it's always appropriate, just to digress a second, because it honors the greatness of that man and it honors the greatness of the NBA as well. So I'm all for the Monday Martin Luther King Day afternoon matinee schedules that the NBA puts out every year.
There's a Hornets game tomorrow, but I'm not going. I'll be watching.
Agent Zero, which man is just like Barney 5. You have to have 0 bullets in the gun.
Yeah.
Give Arenas around.
real quick, Scott, before we wrap up, your favorite moment.
You know what? This may sound crazy, okay? I never really paid a lot of attention to sporting events on Martin Luther King Day because to me, I was so busy with other responsibilities. I always can tell you right now, I'm glad that the NBA plays on Martin Luther King Day. I think that Martin Luther King Day to me is every bit as important to the NBA as Christmas Day is to playing games, especially when you honor such an incredible human being. So I don't have any games that stand out. And I'm being honest with you, I have so many other things that I have worked on over the years that this was just something I never watched a whole lot. So I wish I could give you something better than that. But I just think that the Martin Luther King Day to me means more to me for the NBA than Christmas Day does, which I think
agree.
on the road, the NFL will take over Christmas Day in the NBA. It'll be de-emphasized, but that's just a personal opinion. So.
Oh no, that's so great. I mean, you've had a hell of a career working on other things. That's totally understandable. But playing, to honor the man is always something that's staple, and
Right.
it's never going to go away. But we're in the last 3 minutes.
About the Martin Luther King. I'm sorry. What I think is good about the Martin Luther King holiday over Christmas is the NBA saves Christmas for their better teams, where everybody can participate on Martin Luther King Day if they want to.
Good point, Scott.
Yeah.
And I think that's
true.
one thing that shouldn't be lost sight in it. They cherry pick who they want on Christmas Day, and on Martin Luther King Day, they can all play if they want to.
Everybody wants to play. Yeah, that's true. Well, we're in the last 2 minutes, so I want to thank everybody for watching BasketBros. Shout out to Michael, who was in the comments all night. Hey, do me a favor, Michael. I need you to reach out to either me, Will Vogel, Jacob Christner, or Scott Morganroth and come on this show. We'd be more than happy to have you as a guest. You've been a faithful viewer of the show and everything. We appreciate the comments and the interaction. So reach out to any one of us, and at any time you can come on the show whenever you want. But before we get out of here,
if you ever have any topic ideas, let us know. We normally do 4, and we try to pick them way in advance. A few days, like 4 or 5.
Right. You guys are good when it comes to that stuff.
All right. Yep, absolutely. Will, let everybody know where they can find you.
You guys can find me on Wednesday nights on the NFL Roundtable with Smoking Jeremy B. You guys can find me Thursday nights on the Sip Off. and on Sunday nights on here.
All right. And Jacob, on to you.
You're not supposed to be taking drugs there, brother. Oh, okay.
Just nasal spray.
I know. No, Sunday nights here, BasketBros. Monday nights now. The pundit views. Tomorrow night's a really good one, and the next Monday night night's a good one with a kid named Ash Cull. That's going to be an interesting one. I will enjoy that. And then I'm going to have the next week Andrew Petcash, and then Will be next. So I got that one for those. And then Tuesdays during the season, Confidential. Wednesday nights, doubleheader with the Pundit's Pundit and the Sports Exchange, both with Scott. Thursday nights, kind of go away a little bit with from sports, and I do with films, philosophy, psychology, politics, everything like that. It's the Yin and Yang with TJ Sanson. And then every once in a blue moon when I get called, I'm on the Gauntlet on Fridays. So I stay busy.
Yeah, full slate all around. To our guest, George, thanks a lot for taking part in the show. And if you could let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at SNG Sports 99 on Twitter. You can contact me at Eichorn@yahoo.com. You can read me on the South Florida Tribune and the Motor City Tribune. I'm the author of a book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, and there's a link to purchase that book right off of the South Florida Tribune and my column in the Motor City Tribune. I'm on every Monday night with Fire Up Michigan with Scott Morganroth, and you can read me in the pages of the Detroit Monitor. Again, thank you so much, Denzel, Will, Jacob, and Scott, for having me on tonight.
We'll have you on again.
Pleasure having you. And last but not least, Scott, I know you're about to go to sleep here in like 2 minutes. So,
yeah, the eyes are getting a little heavy, but I got about.
Where can everybody find you?
Well, you know what? I can give you the whole rigmarole by just simply subscribing to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Then you get to see all the shows I'm on. We enjoy Will Vogel's contribution in the chat room. He knows how to whip it up pretty good. Jacob Christner, what can I say about you, pal? You're a thoroughbred when it comes to working with you. You are, but you know, no, you are. I know you are, and I say that with my heart and my mind. But, you know, I appear on the Sports Exchange. And George Eichorn and I have been doing the Sports Exchange for over 40 years on and off. He's my partner in crime, and I started in this business with him, and I drag him wherever I go, which is everywhere. But
I'm just trying to keep up with George.
Yeah, good luck. But but with all due respect, pundits, BasketBros, okay, and no basket schmoes, okay. At least, Will, you know that you have a sense of humor regardless. So, you know, I enjoy being affiliated with Sideline Sports, and I'm now the consultant for Sideline Sports. We have a lot of big things lined up as well. So this show is deepest to my heart, and George knows it because we lived it. So,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, hey, thank everybody for tuning in. Once again, thanks to George for coming on the show. You're welcome back at any time. And for myself, Will Vogel, Jacob Christner, Scott the Motor City Madmouth, and for George Eichorn down there, I am Denzel Snipes, and we will see you all in 7 days with a new topic and a new loaded show. Later.
Yep.